Your phone buzzes, you look down. It's a name you actually like, a friend, maybe even someone you've been meaning to catch up with, but it's not a text, it's a call. And something in you just deflates. You let it ring out. Maybe you text back a few seconds later, "Hey, sorry, in a meeting, what's up?" You weren't in a meeting. You were sitting on your couch doing absolutely nothing. You just didn't want to talk. If this sounds familiar, you are extremely not alone. Something like 3 out of 4 people under 35 say they'd rather text than call, even for things that would take 30 seconds to just say out loud. We've become a generation, several generations actually, that will write a paragraph before we'll press call. So today, we're breaking down the actual psychology of why phone calls feel like a threat, but texting feels like breathing. This isn't about being rude or lazy. There's real science behind it, and by the end of this video, you might understand your own brain a lot better. Let's get into it. Let's start with the single biggest reason: control. When you send a text, you are in complete control of the interaction. You control when you respond. You control how long you take to think about your answer. You control the wording, the tone, whether you add a joke, whether you delete that joke because it sounded weird, and rewrite it 4 times before hitting send. A phone call gives you none of that. It's live. It's unscripted. The second you pick up, you're improvising a performance with no retakes. You can't pause mid-sentence to Google how to phrase something. You can't sit with silence for 10 minutes while you figure out what to say. Every awkward pause, every moment where you talk over the other person, it's all happening in real time, and there's no undo button. Psychologists call this a loss of communicative control, and for a lot of people, especially those who lean anxious or introverted, that loss of control registers as a genuine threat, not a "someone's chasing me" threat, but a subtler background level one. The same category of stress as being called on unexpectedly in class or being asked a question in a meeting you weren't prepared for. Your brain doesn't fully distinguish between mild social unpredictability and danger. It just registers unpredictability, and unpredictability triggers a stress response. Texting removes almost all of that unpredictability. A call reintroduces it completely. Here's the second piece: cognitive load. A phone call actually asks a lot more of your brain than people give it credit for. Think about everything you're processing during a single call. You're listening to words. You're interpreting tone. Is that sarcasm? Are they annoyed? Are they tired? You're formulating your response while they're still talking, because if you wait until they finish to start thinking, there'll be an awkward silence. You're managing the rhythm of turn-taking so you don't interrupt, but also don't leave dead air. And you're doing all of this with 0 visual cues, unless it's a video call, in which case now you're also monitoring your own face. That's a lot of simultaneous processing. Compare that to texting, where you get to do all of that same interpretive work, but slowly, one piece at a time, with the ability to reread what they said as many times as you need. Texting is essentially communication with training wheels. An open book, untimed training wheels at that. Calling is the pop quiz. Now let's talk about something specific to phone calls in particular, not video calls, not voicemails, just the sound of a ringtone. For a huge number of people, an unexpected call doesn't register as "someone wants to talk to me." It registers as "something is wrong." Think about it. When was the last time someone called you out of nowhere just to chat, and it was genuinely no big deal? For most of us, the answer is basically never. Calls have become reserved for emergencies, urgent logistics, or awkward conversations someone doesn't want to have over text, a breakup, bad news, a confrontation. So your brain has been trained through years of pattern recognition to treat an incoming call as a flag for potential bad news. That's not anxiety being irrational. That's your brain doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Noticing that thing you're seeing, a call, usually correlates with the thing you're worried about, a problem. It's a completely reasonable prediction based on the data you've collected over your lifetime. It just happens to make your stomach drop every time your phone rings. And for people with social anxiety specifically, that anticipatory DREAD can be intense. Not because talking on the phone is objectively dangerous, but because the uncertainty of not knowing what's about to be said, combined with having no time to prepare a response, hits every trigger point that social anxiety cares about. Let's zoom out for a second, because this isn't just a personal quirk. It's generational and it's cultural. For most of human history, real-time communication was the only option. If you wanted to talk to someone, you talked to them in person or eventually by phone, and that was that. There was no alternative. So people built the social skills and the tolerance for that kind of immediate, unfiltered interaction because they had to. But somewhere in the last 20 years, an alternative showed up: asynchronous communication, texting, messaging apps, email, social media DMs. And once that alternative existed, a huge portion of the population quietly migrated toward it. Because, given the choice, most people prefer lower stakes, self-paced interaction over high stakes, real-time interaction. This is actually a really important reframe. It's not that people today are somehow worse at conversation than people were 50 years ago. It's that 50 years ago there was no off-ramp. Now there is. And everyone who finds real-time interaction even mildly draining has taken it. Then the backup. For someone who learned to socialize primarily through messaging, a phone call isn't a nostalgic throwback. It's a completely different skill set that never got the same amount of practice. It's like asking someone who learned math on a calculator to suddenly do long division by hand. They can probably do it. It's just going to feel a lot more effortful than it needs to. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this is just an introvert thing, right? Introverts hate calls, extroverts love them. Not exactly. That's actually one of the most common misconceptions here. Plenty of extroverted people also avoid calls, not because talking drains them, but because a spontaneous call removes their ability to prepare. And some extroverts actually care a lot about how a conversation lands, which means they want time to think about what they're going to say. Meanwhile, plenty of introverts are completely fine on calls with close friends because the relationship is familiar enough that the unpredictability is low stakes. What actually predicts call avoidance more reliably than introversion is something psychologists sometimes call social battery unpredictability. Basically, how much uncertainty is involved in a given interaction. A call from your mom, someone whose conversational patterns you know inside and out. Low uncertainty, low avoidance. A call from a coworker you don't know well, or worse, an unknown number. High uncertainty, high avoidance. So it's less, I don't like people, and more, I don't like not knowing what I'm walking into. Here's another layer. Calls are a performance, and texts are a draft. When you're on a call, your voice, your tone, your reaction time, all of it is being broadcast live and evaluated in real time by the other person, whether they mean to be evaluating you or not. Every awkward laugh, every wait what, every moment you didn't understand something and had to ask them to repeat it, that's all visible. There's a kind of social exposure to a live call that a text conversation just doesn't have. With texting, you get to present a curated version of yourself. You can take 30 seconds to come up with a good response instead of blurting out the first thing that comes to mind. You can send a voice memo you recorded 3 times until it sounded natural. You can literally delete an entire message and start over if it came across wrong. This isn't dishonesty, it's just a lower friction way to communicate for people who care about how their words land. And once you get used to that lower friction mode, the higher friction mode, live, unscripted, no-edit conversation, starts to feel unnecessarily risky by comparison. Why would you choose the version of this interaction where you might say something clumsy when there's a version where you basically can't? There's also a much more practical reason that gets overlooked. Calls demand your full attention right now and texts don't. A text can sit in your notifications for 2 hours while you finish what you're doing and nobody's offended. A call is a demand for your immediate, undivided attention delivered without warning regardless of what you're in the middle of. You could be cooking, working in the bathroom, mid-conversation with someone else, and the phone doesn't care. It just rings. Psychologically, that kind of forced task switching is genuinely unpleasant. There's a well-documented cost to interrupting a focused task called attention residue. Basically, part of your brain stays stuck on the thing you were doing even after you've switched tasks, which makes the new task, in this case a live phone call, feel extra effortful. So, even if you genuinely enjoy the conversation, once you're in it, the interruption itself creates a little flash of resistance before you even answer. Texting sidesteps that completely. It respects your current context instead of hijacking it. So let's tie this together. Why does texting feel so easy when calling feels like a chore? You control the pace. You control the wording. There's no live performance pressure. It doesn't interrupt what you're doing. It doesn't carry the something's wrong alarm. And you can multitask or disengage without it being rude. Texting checks almost every box that reduces social stress. Predictability, control, low exposure, and zero interruption cost. Calling checks almost none of them. It's not that people have gotten antisocial. It's that texting is structurally a much lower anxiety way to maintain the exact same relationships. Now, here's the part where I'll be honest with you. Avoiding calls isn't a character flaw, but it's worth noticing if it's costing you something. Voice conveys warmth and nuance that text just can't fully replicate. Tone, laughter, the little pauses that say more than words do. Some relationships genuinely deepen faster over a 10-minute call than over 200 text messages spread across a week. So if call anxiety is something you want to work on, a few small things actually help. Texting first to ask, "Hey, can I call in 5?" removes the unpredictability, which is often the biggest trigger. Scheduling calls instead of taking them cold gives your brain time to prepare instead of ambushing it. And reminding yourself in the moment that an awkward pause is not a catastrophe. It's just a pause can take a surprising amount of pressure off. You don't need to become a phone person overnight. You just don't need to let a ringtone control your nervous system either. At the end of the day, the way we communicate has changed faster than our nervous systems have had time to catch up. Texting isn't laziness and avoiding calls isn't rudeness. It's your brain doing exactly what it's built to do, minimizing unpredictability and conserving energy. The tools just got better at giving it what it wants. If this explained a little bit about your own habits, like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments. And if you've got a phone call you've been avoiding for 3 days, this is your sign to just text them, "Can I call you?" first. Baby steps